Hello and welcome. She was known for her earlier book, Daughter Story of Goa, and in many ways that symbolizes her own story as well as the story of Goa. She's back now with another book which is about her mother, a story of struggle and survival and resilience. I'm now joined by Maria Couto, the author, and also with her Girish Karnad, a long friend and associate who's going to be joining us. Maria, I'm familiar with your earlier book on Goa, A Daughter Story, and you've written another one which is, I'm assuming, geographically and is centered in the same place, Filomena's Journey, Portrait of a Marriage, a Family and Culture, which has just been released by Girish Karnad. So tell us about this book and where does it pick up from where the last one left off, if it does?
It doesn't really pick up. It's not a sequel, and it wasn't planned when the first book was being written. It is a much more personal book. It is a celebration and a tribute to my mother, who was an extraordinarily creative woman, and you know, has had, as Girish Karnad has said, the book is really an odyssey because it talks about her epic journey with a young family and how she
actually moved from Goa to Dharwad in 1945 with all her household luggage in a brake van, in a train, and came to Dharwad to set up a house afresh in an area where she didn't know the language, local language, didn't know anyone except a cousin. It's an extraordinary journey, and she left her family behind and she brought the family. And this is why I say it's called Filomena's Journeys, but it could have been called Filomena's Journey or The Journey, in fact, because it's quite an extraordinary story.
Right. So what impressed you about this?
That's what impressed me.
More specifically.
Because that's because
no, is it just a relocation?
That whole generation, it's with my mother, her mother, and so on. The women were faced with all kinds of challenges, which today education opportunities have made easier. You know, they were stepping out of a medieval era into a modern era, and they have faced all kinds of decisions they had to take, which were extraordinary, which made them different. That's what the book is about, I think.
Yeah, it is, and in many ways what Girish says is right. It is an epic journey and could have been titled as just a journey. But in my mind, as a child growing up with a mother who was constantly making very difficult journeys to Goa, the book explains why they are difficult. It became journeys, and then there were happier journeys later. And then there's a cultural journey because she moves from a Portuguese-dominated culture to what was then British India. Then she moves into mainstream India. So she interacts with Hinduism, with Kannada, Marathi, English, Hindi. These were languages which she had never heard.
Konkani, I presume, somewhere.
No, that's the mother tongue.
No, I said she interacts with. Okay. These are new languages to her, which she begins to listen to only when she's 40. So she grew up with Konkani and Portuguese, and as Girish said, she made this epic journey, the first journey out, the physical journey, not knowing any of these languages, not even having heard some of these languages. So it is, you know, an extraordinary, and as somebody said at the question and hour interview, that it's very unusual because in the narrative of Portuguese Goa, it is always people clinging to. He speaks about the Lusophone world and clinging to Portuguese culture, clinging to what is left, even if it's all dead. Whereas my mother sort of just gave it all up and moved into a new environment. It was not a political act in the sense that the personal is political, yes, but in the sense of she was running away from Portuguese Goa colonialism. It wasn't that.
So is that the more dominant theme? The fact that she was exemplary.
That is the theme.
Giving up.
She came and then she stayed. You see, it was not as though she just escaped for 6 months or 3 months. She was escaped for a temporary relief. She wasn't. She came back. She brought up the children. She brought her husband. And you know, they all grew up. She went to college there. So it is really a creation of a new home, a new world, in a completely alien place, which is quite marvelous. Which is a theme.
Any instances that you'd like to narrate from either the high points or the low points in that phase, in the transition?
The high point in the transition, the low point in the transition definitely was this huge gamble. It was a gamble.
Yeah.
And because she left us behind, and she left because it was a troubled time with my father, and he was not wanting to come, but in the end he came because he was a good father and he was a good husband, but an irresponsible husband. You can be a good husband and yet be an irresponsible husband. He was, and so he eventually did come, So that was a big gamble, and that is in many senses in her life a very big step to be taken. She had other problems growing up. I mean, she lost her mother when she was 3, she lost her father when she was 7. Yes, she was brought up by a very loving grandmother, but those were traumas very early in childhood, and maybe that's how she developed a very strong sense of self, you know, inner resources. So she had lows. And once she moved to Dharwad, there were still lows in the sense that she had to balance and keep the family finances going, the equanimity, calm in the face of a difficult marriage. But after that, the triumph was after we were all educated, we all got jobs, we all got married, she had fantastic sons-in-law, and she was traveling all over the world. So those were her triumphs. Yeah. And she was traveling alone. You know, she didn't want anybody. She just asked for a wheelchair after she was 70. She even went to Brazil alone. So it's, I have often talked to Girish about his mother, and we have agreed that that generation was special.
Special. They faced special because that was where modernity was hitting and facing medieval period.
But is that anything to do with the specific
and women
world?
faced it more.
Yeah.
The men made the transition because they went from this power to that. You know, medieval power, they learnt English or whatever it is, got jobs, like Alban's transition into, you know, but with the women it was very hard to, you know, because they were not completely prepared for the new world, and they had to get into that position and occupy a place and responsibility. Which was, you know.
So, is there also the need to tell such stories of women from that era, which could, I would imagine, influence positively the women of this?
Absolutely, and give them the credit for what they were.
It's a cultural history. It's what our mothers have lived through, and what our sisters and daughters have, how they have been created.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, without that, I mean, she is there, but I mean, she is a creation of her mother. You know, of that particular era and those struggles. Me too, I mean, you know.
Right. So this book, I'm imagining, could have been written at many points of time. So
no, it couldn't.
Okay.
You mean the narrative could have started and carried on?
No,
I don't
I'm
understand.
saying, is there a reason that was there something that influenced or triggered you to write this book at this point of time? Because I'm assuming it could have been written
my mother's
earlier. Life
and my father's personality were of great interest to writers who were my friends.
Okay.
I rang a writer friend of mine who's a Kannada writer, Prabhakar, and I said, why did you ask me to write about my father? He kept saying, because he never met my father. So I said, you know, you landed in Dharwad after he passed away, so why did you ask? I rang him just 10 days ago, and he said, because he seemed like a fascinating character. I heard so much about him, and I just felt he's a fascinating character to explore. So here's a writer responding to what he had heard, you know. And there were others who, of course, knew about my mother's life and felt that should be celebrated. Girish was one of them, though he doesn't remember my saying so, but I quite clearly remember him and other Konkani writer friends of mine in Goa saying, give up on literature, why are you going on writing about Graham Greene and all that? Anyone can do that. Aamchi Kaani, let's write our story, write the story of Goa. Because it is a culture that's dying, whether it is the culture of the Catholic world or the Hindu world or the environment, it's all going.
Because?
Because
time, politics, history,
tourism, you know, yeah, it's.
And you also feel that this generation, however you define it, is unable to carry the threads. I mean, whether it's the historical threads or the memories.
I think the forces of modernity, if you want to call it that, I don't call it. I mean, it are too strong. And Girish has mentioned politics. You know, you can't take a step in any which way because you are trapped. I mean, you want to oppose casinos, you can't. You want to oppose mining, I mean, you do it, but it's at great cost, and you don't always win the battle because the politicians. I mean, you have politicians saying that without casinos we can't have funds for Goa, revenue. There's problems in Goa because the revenue of the mines haven't come. So how did we manage before?
That was an era when Goan economy was considered backward.
Yeah.
You know, and there were no colleges, and everyone used to come here for education, and there were no jobs people used to come here for. But what prosperity has brought is it
degradation, absolute degradation. I wanted, but on the other hand, yesterday I attended this discussion on the charm of the Mohassal, you know, The Magic of the Muhammad with Ian Jack and Pavan Verma. And they were talking about people moving away from villages, Amitabh Kumar from Patna and so forth. And I wanted to intervene, but I didn't get a chance, saying that in Goa, we are not wanting to move out of villages. We are restoring our houses, but what is terrible, which is destroying our villages, is that the rich and the famous from Bombay and Delhi and abroad are coming and building and destroying an environment for which they are actually coming. So, you know, to do a bit of it is fine, to restore old houses is fine, but you have these big builders, Rahejas, DLF, building 700 flats, 500
no connection
flats.
with the culture.
No connection. Day before yesterday, a friend of mine here was saying, she said, Maria, we don't understand how these people have no connection. They don't know the language, they don't know a soul, they don't want to know a soul, and they're happy to come and live in Goa. What does it mean? And I said, I don't know. I mean, they're obviously escaping from something, but they're certainly going to destroy the peace that we once had.
And yet you've responded in the best way you can, which is to write a book and a story of an era which I guess is...
my books are seen as capturing a lost world. In fact, in an excerpt that came out in the Navin Times in Goa last week, the editor, the caption he wrote is that it captures a world forever lost, which is not to say that I am capturing a Portuguese colonialism. I'm capturing the environment and a certain kind of humanism that existed.
Mr. Karnad, what's your connection, or I know you have a connection with the region, but you were born in Maharashtra, you've lived in Karnataka most of your life. What's the Goa?
With here, the connection is her.
Yeah. I meant Yeah, I meant geographically. Yeah.
We have been friends for 60 years, we were in college together, we've done a lot of things together, we've done plays together, even as students we have been, so over 60 years.
Right.
Then as she has developed, I have developed parallelly, and we've at various points been meeting, and that has, so we have continued, and we have continued arguing, we've continued.
It's been one of my great, the great rewards of my life is that old friendships have continued and sustained me.
I've known her really, 60 years now. So
No, and actually that was to lead to my next question, which is that, you've also expressed anguish at what you see in Goa, and I guess you've also seen that happen in maybe Karnataka, North Karnataka for sure.
No, the situation is very different in Goa. Anyway, I can't express anguish because I haven't experienced it. Yeah, one could say that I'm one of the perpetrators of, insofar as I come there for tourism and for holidays and, this sort of thing. I don't think modern age has been degrading everywhere. It has been particularly dreadful for places like Goa, which have become tourist resorts, which have brought outside money, people who don't belong there. I don't think it's happened to Dharwad, for instance. Dharwad has been destroyed in another way. I mean, it's changed. Change you can't avoid. I mean, it will change the same Dharwad that we were in can't remain forever. No, that's not. But she has described a kind of cultural and degradation which comes with prosperity, with money, with outsiders coming in, and and then turning.
We call it the new colonialism. It is, because there is also a sense of scorn. I mean, they despise. There's no question of thinking of Goa as anything other than a place where we can enjoy.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And they don't understand that Goans can be very conservative. They feel that because it is a freer society than, say, any small town or even big cities, in the sense that the socializing between men and women is far more relaxed. That we've never had a parda system. There are any amount of bars, so drinking is freely available. And if I order a whiskey in a bar and sit with my friends, nobody will say, "My goodness, look at this woman drinking." So the idea for the people who come from outside is that the Goan society itself is permissive. I mean, that's what they feel. And secondly, I mean, we certainly think that there is a whole lot of domestic tourists who come there only to release their inhibitions. It's just that,
So let me ask you in a sort of more forward-looking way. I mean, young people who read this book, or in general who feel that we can do something, or they could do something to preserve some element of culture that
they can't.
They can't. Okay.
They can't. So the point is, there's too much money involved in it.
Yeah.
Too much. The processes involved are completely destructive. all you can say, that's why she's been called the last witness of that age.
Yeah.
That age will be destroyed. You can see the money that's created in Goa doesn't go to Goans. I mean, all the jobs, they're all for outsiders who come in. I mean,
those who are built,
those who work, the waiters, the reception people. You go to Goa in hotels, you see who works in these hotels. They're all from outside.
The problem with Goa is that there is no employment at all, and our student population after graduating goes away.
Right.
So,
and what is very popular, of course, is the hotel industry, where they do these courses because there are any amount of colleges. And then they apprentice themselves to local hotels for a while to get experience, and then they go on to cruise ships and whatever else, they pay them much more.
So the book is not a critique of modernism. The book is what modernity has done to Goa, specific. And that has to be understood.
And
it's not just
really asking
globalization comes and destroys.
Actually, I haven't tackled modernity here at all. It is really a story of the past.
Sure. No, and I'm really trying to get something to, end on a more positive note, if we can, is to say that, people who read this book, I mean, they could be inspired. I mean, one is surely the individual who is at the center of all of this.
Absolutely, it is meant to inspire.
And to what extent can they convert that inspiration?
No, for me, it's also a critique of Goan upper class culture, as one would critique any upper class culture, to what extent would they, what was your question?
No, how do they convert, if they feel something for either Goa or the individual who had a role to play in the state of Goa at that time, how do they convert that into something more positive and effective to make a change?
I think it's the individual story that's inspiring, what her mother, how she faced this change, how she probably, and how the individual sorts it out.
Actually, one of the problems in Goa is that there is, it's very difficult for Goans to face social change because it's been so rapid, as Girish said. It's just too rapid, I mean, Goa has been liberated 60 years ago, but the tourist industry and the whole taking over of big money of the Goan environment has happened maybe in the last 15 years.
15 years, I guess 15, 20 years.
And partly the Goans are to blame because they have sold land. I mean, land is extremely expensive. Now, Goans can't afford to buy land. They cannot afford to buy land anymore. So it's a kind of vexed question because the Goans have sold, but then I may sell my land, but I haven't sold it for the government to give any amount of FAR and FIR or whatever it's called, FSI. So you're destroying your villages. Charles Correa has written with great passion about the unique character of Goa, which has the wilderness and the urban and the rural. I mean, the wilderness, the rural and the urban in one flow. I am living in a village where I have Aldona, where I have what I call my forest on one side, and then there's a garden this side, parking garden this side, back garden, and yet if I just cross the road and go to walk 5 minutes without any high rise or anything else, there is an ATM, there's a bank, there is an internet cafe, there is a little super bazaar, there's a post office, and there's a chapel, and there's a temple. Nothing high rise. It's still village, and you still walk to it. You can't drive to it. I can drive around it. So that was Goa. But I feel now that ours will probably be the last island because we have little patches of land all around. Because everyone is busy building, and houses, I mean, these clusters of villas, as they are called, are sold for lots and lots of money. So I'm sure my friends who live in Bombay and Delhi are going to be very annoyed with me for speaking like this, but that's a fact.
But it's true.
It's a fact. It's a fact.
Right. So I wish you and the Filomena story all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.